Good afternoon, everyone. We are back in Exodus chapter 27, and we are continuing on the description and the details and the plan and the design of what God had wanted to construct, both the design of the tabernacle and the structures of the tabernacle and the instruments of the tabernacle. And I had always repeated the point that it's God's tabernacle, and hence it would be God's rules as to what goes into the tabernacle. This is something which many of us may have missed because we might think that we would like to do different things for God. But God has a particular way of doing things, and He is always looking at His way. And not that He doesn't care what we think, because God is God. Like all important people, like the king, for example. The king doesn't care what the people would want to do for the king, but the king has certain protocols that he has so decided that that's what he wants his people to do when they meet. And so when we talk about the tabernacle, it is a place where God meets with man, and within the tabernacle itself, God meets with Moses. And in this idea of meeting, it is within the perimeter of God's desire and plan and design and structure, everything to do with God. So God's tabernacle, God's rules. So He has given Moses specific designs. And last week we saw how the tabernacle was supposed to be structured, what kind of cloth, how it was to be woven, the kind of colors that you put together. And one of the things that we never talked about, which is about colors. Color schemes are all derived from herbs and animals and plant life and even sea life. And that is how a lot of these things are done in a very natural way, and it's constructed by God. Now, obviously, there is some form of latitude for, I guess what we would say, artistic design. As in any construction, with the blueprints given, there is always the external finishing, the touchings, how exquisite it looks. Although God had said that you need to weave a cherubim onto the veil that separates the sanctuary and the most holy place. It's up to the weavers to do that. And so there is some level of latitude, but by and large, it is God's design. When we come to chapter 27, we now look at the altar. Every time we look at the altar, and the altar has this Hebrew word, mitzbeach. Mitzbeach. And mitzbeach always means an altar, and it is always with reference to sacrifice. And with reference to sacrifice, it's always about a slaughter. And that's where the words are all built together. And so the altar is a very central, a central focal point within the perimeter of the tabernacle, but it's located outside the sanctuary. And hence, the altar is now very specific. God says, you shall make an altar of acacia wood. And by the way, the word wood is tree. So if you think of it as a tree, that would be interesting. We will look at the tree tomorrow in our Bible Land walkthrough, because the acacia wood is very typically found in that part of the world. And the tree is a big tree and it is solid wood. And there are dimensions, 5 cubits long, 5 cubits wide. The altar shall be a square. The height shall be 3 cubits. Then you shall make its horns on its 4 corners. The horn shall be one piece with it, and you shall overlay it with bronze. Now, let's take a quick look at this. Remember, the cubit is always measured from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. And that's how your cubit is done. So let's say an average cubit would be, say, let's, for our purposes today, 20 inches. So 5 cubits will be 100 inches square. And then we have 3 cubits as its height, and that would be 60 inches high. Now, if we were to draw it out, it should look something like this. Right? It is a square. And so the square would be 100 inches and 60 inches. And this would be about 5 feet. And that would be about probably almost 9 feet, right? So 3 feet, about 9 feet. But the important thing is that there are 4 horns. And there's one piece with this altar. Now, one of the things that we may not be aware of is that horns like these are symbolic of all altars of the time. And wherever you go, the horns of the altar represent the power, the strength, the might. And as you know, the word Aleph, right? And this is how we write the Aleph. In the Hebrew, it would be looking like this. It's the picture of an ox head with the horns. And so horns are very important, and it represents power, might, right? Strength. And hence, this altar has 4 horns. And in pagan times, they also have this same concept of having horns around the areas where they make sacrifices to. Now, going back to our text, it says, also you shall make its pans to receive its ashes. And basically, they are collecting troughs. And whenever you make a sacrifice, the animal would be burnt to ashes, and the ashes needs to be cleared. And so the shovels and basins, as forks and fire pans, everything made of bronze. And this is what I want to point out to you. You see, these are all bronze. And you would find this. Last week and the week before, we were looking at the instruments, the wall paneling. They're all the tables, right, of the showbread and the incense table, the Ark of the Covenant, the covering of the Ark, the cherubim that would be, the 2 cherubims that would be carved to be the cover of the box. They're all made of gold. Now, when it's outside, and once it's outside the tabernacle or the sanctuary, we have the altar, and the altar is made of bronze. All the utensils is made of bronze. So on the outside, they don't keep it with gold because gold will not well, I would say decay. It will get dirty, and it will attract too much attention, and it's not as hardy in the to the elements. So when you walk into the sanctuary, it will be a wow experience. Everything is gold. and in some cases, solid gold, right? Now, once it's on the outside, bronze and silver are used. The instruments, the utensils, the altar is bronze, and it's solid bronze. Then it says, you shall make a grate for it, a network. I would think that this, in verse 4, the network really means a lattice. In our case, I'm not sure whether you're familiar with cornice. These are the trails that is lining the side so that it gives it some form of a lining and some artistic structure, so that it's not just flat paneling, right? These are the corner woodwork that's on the top edges and it needs to be made with bronze. And on the lattice, you shall make 4 bronze rings at its 4 corners. And you shall put under the rim of the altar beneath, that the cornice or the lattice may be midway up the altar. And you shall make poles for the altar, poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with bronze, as opposed to gold, when the poles for the ark, for the tables of showbread, as well as the incense, they are made of acacia wood overlaid with gold. For the external, overlaid with bronze. The pole shall be put in the rings, and the pole shall be on 2 sides of the altar to bear it. So it becomes a very mobile altar. And you shall make it hollow with boards, as it was shown you on the mountain, so they shall make it. Now, what do you mean by hollow with boards? The idea is this. When it says hollow, basically it means hollowed out. And to hollow out, it implies weight. The weight is lighter because it is supposed to be mobile. If it is pure solid wood, the altar in this dimension is extremely huge. If you find it to be almost 9 feet square, or 8, over 8 feet, or 8 feet thereabouts square, it's huge. And so God has made such a design that it is mobile, it is lasting, it is sturdy, it won't fall apart, it's made of acacia wood, and it is hollowed out. And hence we find this specific instructions given to the altar. Now, the reason being is that they will be using the altar a lot. And I just want to point out to you what we have talked about in Exodus chapter 20, where we were talking about the 10 commandments. And right at the last paragraph of chapter 20, we spoke of the altar with the 4 horns, and it is supposed to have a platform, a running platform, and not steps. And this would be God's altar. And if you take a good look at it, this platform is solid platform that it is to walk up and not step up. That's a unique differentiator from the Hebrew altar, that is different from the pagan altars. So everywhere else in the world, when you find an altar, they all step up, walking up, but this is humbly striding up, right? And that's the intent. And so the service of the altar is for the priest to use. Moving down, we have what we call the court of the tabernacle. Now, what is the court of the tabernacle? The idea of a court is what we call an enclosure or a yard. So that's why we have the word courtyard. It is a surrounded area of the tabernacle. And so that would be very similar to this. You have the tabernacle done this way, and you have the sanctuary, right? This would be the sanctuary, and this would be how the tent of the tabernacle will be done. And this would be boards, and this would be an opening. And so when we talk about a courtyard, this would be the court, where when you enter in, that would be the court. And here you would have your altar, right? So understand that whenever the Bible talks about a court, that would be the outer area, not inside the sanctuary. And so when we read Psalm chapter 100, enter into his courts with thanksgiving, that's what we mean. And then from the south side. Now, why is there south side? And how do you imagine the south side? And one of the things that I have always talked about, the Hebrew direction, the face always will be facing east. And so the opening or the main doors of the sanctuary will face east. The gates of the tabernacle will also face east. And so south will be the right hand. And that is what it means by the south side. There'll be hangings for the court made of fine woven linen, 100 cubits long for one side, 20 pillars with 20 sockets with bronze. The hooks of the pillars and their bands will be silver. So the hooks are silver. The sockets are bronze. And along the length of the north side, there'll be hangings 100 cubits long with 20 pillars and 20 sockets of bronze, and the hooks of pillars and the bands of silver. So the south and the north side is 100 cubits each, and they are facing each other. And what we say is that this is symmetry. Symmetry, they are identical. And along the width of the court of the west side shall be hangings of 50 cubits in their 10 pillars and their 10 sockets. The width of the court on the east side shall be 50 cubits. The hanging on one side of the gate will be 15 with the 3 pillars and their 3 sockets. And that's how this works. Okay. And on the other side shall be hanging of 15 cubits and their 3 pillars and their 3 sockets. Now these are all what we see as a dimension. So let me quickly use this dimension to roughly draw this out. It is long, right? And it's 100 cubits and it's 50 cubits. And it is always like that with 20 poles. And here with 10, right? With 10. And then we have the gates right along here. And so that is the dimension. I know you call it the blueprint, and that would be the demands of God. So we have to do that. And so Moses is to actually do exactly just that. In verse 16, it talks about the gate of the court. Now, this is important. Whenever we see this word gate, everywhere there is a gate. Sha'ar is a gate. So let me just write this down. Sha'ar. And the idea of a gate is this entrance, this opening, and it is for entry, and is also for exit. In the gates of the city is where the meeting place is, where the elders, the judges will be seated, and people will mingle around that place. If you need to have justice, that's where you go. It is also a marketplace where people will mingle, and nobody will be directly inside, and mostly will be on the outside. And so they would sit at the gate. So the gates of the ancient times are very important. When you break the gate, you have conquered the city. And so the gate of the court is to enter into the court of the tabernacle. There will be a screen of 20 cubits long. And then there are these colors, blue, purple, and scarlet, woven linen made by a weaver, right? The one who is making it. It shall have 4 pillars, 4 sockets. All the pillars around the court shall have bands of silver. The hooks shall be silver, the sockets of bronze. The length of the court, 100 cubits, 50 cubits wide throughout. Height is 5 cubits, fine woven linen, its sockets of bronze. Utensils are all for its service, its pegs of the court, all bronze. And so we see specific use of metals here, where the pegs of the court, the sockets are bronze, and you find that the altar is bronze. Okay, the pillars are acacia wood, but you have bands of silver so that the hooks of silver can hook onto the sockets. And what do they hook? They actually hook all the cloth around, and they hook the boards together. Now, the gate of the court is not solid. It is fine woven linen. Now, what do you see is this? And this is 50 cubits. This is 100 cubits. And the gate is 20 cubits. 20 cubits. And thereby we have 15 cubits and 15 cubits left on the side. This is the structure of the gate. And thereby gives us the impression of a blueprint. God is giving Moses a blueprint. So think of it this way. If you were the architects, would you go away from the blueprint? You may enhance it, but you cannot go away. So the enhancements here would be how they finish. But they have to follow exactly to the measurement of the blueprint. And God has also given Moses the image or the imagery of the final picture of the tabernacle, which means that the designers will have to follow the vision of God. If you had let's say if you have a piece of land and you had an architect design the blueprint for you, you have input all your desires, and there is an artistic rendition of your house. And so when you expect the builder to build your house, you expect it to come out that exactly same way that you have envisioned it. Although it's a picture in mind, and you have given the dimensions that is accurate, like an architectural drawing, you have given your desire of material. What do you think the builder is supposed to build? If the builder builds anything that is different from your imagination and your desire, how would you feel? And hence, when God tells Moses, tell the children of Israel, do exactly as I say, as I had shown you on the mountain, basically the Israelites were the builders, and they have to build according to God's dimensions, God's desire, God's vision, God's impression and imagery of the entire place, because it is God's place. Your house, your design. And that would be, I would say, a very good equivalent of thinking behind why God is so specific in this case. We come to our last segment of chapter 27, verse 20. You shall command the children of Israel that they bring you pure oil of pressed olives for the light, to cause the lamp to burn continually. Now, this is important. In verse 20, commands, orders, you shall order them. As a parent orders the children, pick up your toys. It means that your child has no choice to the matter. You shall order the children of Israel. It means that the children of Israel has no choice to the matter. Just listen and do it. When you are at the restaurant and you place an order, that's what you are expecting to happen. And so that's what orders is all about. And hence the children of Israel is supposed to do exactly as they're told. And so the word bring literally means to fetch, is to take. And this idea of pure, well, I guess pure would be pure. It is freshly, I would say, freshly pressed. Freshly pressed olives, right? Oil that comes out from the olive. One of the things that you can get to see in Israel is how they used to press olives. One huge log with a number of presses, and they press it down onto a few troughs. And they press a few times, and that's where I think we get the differences between extra virgin, virgin, and normal pressed. And each is used for different purposes. And so for lampstands, they are pressed from olives for lighting. And so that's what it means. For the light, or for the lighting, the illumination of the lamps, to cause the lamps to burn continually. The idea of burn is that you need to understand that this word burn doesn't mean burn. It means to I guess, to ascend, to rise up. And this would be the imagery of the flame, The idea of continually is a word called tamid. It means to stretch the burning, stretch the light. Continually is to stretch. So it means that it needs to continually burn. So that's our modern day understanding. But in the literal sense of the word, it is to stretch the light and to make it light up always using olive oil. Can they use any other oil? And the answer is no. Why? Because it's a command of God. So can we ignore God's command? And the answer is no. So the children of Israel understands these things. Now, in the tabernacle of meeting, I think this is important for us to know a little bit of the Hebrew word. Remember, this would be the tent called the ohel of meeting, moed. You find this in Genesis chapter 1 when God put the sun, moon, and stars in place. It is for appointments, meeting. appointment. Right? Appointment. And it would be outside the veil, which is in before the testimony. And you know, the testimony here is the reminder that is inside the ark. That would be the memorial. All of that would be inside the ark, right? The things that is inside the ark of the covenant. That would be the 10 Commandments, the pot of manna, right? Aaron's rod. And then all of these is important because that is a testimony of God being with them to take them out of Egypt. The rod of Aaron, the feeding of them, which is the pot of manna or man, and the 10 Commandments, which is the memorial of God's laws given to them, written by God with his finger, that is stored in there. And so that's the testimony on the memorial, right? The memorial. And what does that mean is that whenever you look at the ark and you think of the ark, it is to remind you of the presence of God, the deliverance of God, the protection of God, and what God has done with the Israelites in the wilderness. That's the memorial. Aaron and his sons, and this is a designation. This is the appointment. It is not anyone else but Aaron and his sons. They are the ones who shall tend it. What do you mean, tend it? The idea of tending is to set in order. All right. Now, set in order means what in this case? All these things, to light the lamp, to make sure the lamp is there, there's incense, there's the order, the arrangement. That's what it means. Only Aaron and his sons can do it, and nobody else. And so this is God's appointment. And so later, when there was a formal appointment, we find the sons of that Korah himself had opposed this. But one of the things that Korah forgot, and many of us might in case we do, is that this is God's tabernacle, God's sanctuary, God's rules. Right? God's sanctuary, God's rules. I know I have been repeating this for the umpteenth time, but basically I hope to get into our minds that we are talking about God's design, God's place, God's house, God's appointed meeting place, and it's from evening to morning. Understand this, evening to morning is the whole day, right? The whole day, which means that they are to take care of it every day, day and night, or in this case, night and day. And it is before the Lord, because whatever they do, it is in the presence of God, to his face, actually, if that's what we want to see. The word before the Lord is towards the face of Jehovah. And that is so sober and so serious a work. So the priesthood, eventually we see it, inculcates the soberness and the seriousness whenever they attend to the commands of God, who can do what. And they're very careful. Why? Because that's God's words, God's commands, God's work, and God's instructions. And here God says, it shall be a statute. Now understand the statute. The statute is hukah, right? Hukah. Remember, it's a chet, right? It's a hookah. And we're normally translating it as ordinance. Ordinance, where it has a perimeter of what can and cannot do. That's what the ordinance is. You must do it this way. You cannot do it any other way. So you must use pure oil of pressed olives. You have to keep the light burning continually. And who can do that? Aaron and his sons. They are the only ones. So it's not all of Levi. It is specifically Aaron and his sons, and not Moses. And it has to be the whole time. Why? Because inside the sanctuary, there's no light. The only light is the menorah. This is that only light. And so it is the instructions of God of how to do it forever. Olam, for as long as it takes, to their generations, on behalf of the children of Israel. What does that mean? It means that Aaron and sons, let me just put it in a different color, Aaron and sons is the representative on behalf of the children of Israel. God doesn't allow anyone else to come in to do any of these things except for Aaron and his sons. This is a statute of God. And that is God's sanctuary, God's rules. And it is that important, that's serious. And so God is not giving them a leeway saying that, well, let me find a replacement, right? I could have somebody else do it, but it doesn't work that way. And with this, I will leave us to ponder over this entire chapter of chapter 27. And with this, we end chapter 27.